Judith Roberts, 1972, Tamworth. A bike ride led to a 25-year injustice. Every quiet place has a moment that divides time into before and after. Before, a road is just a road. A hedge is just part of the landscape. A bicycle ride is just a child taking a familiar route close to home. After, the same place becomes a question that never stops asking itself. On a summer evening in June of 1972, 14-year-old Judith Roberts left her family home in Wigginton, near Tamworth, Staffordshire. She was not heading into the unknown. She was not leaving behind a strange note or stepping into some dramatic scene. She was doing something ordinary, something local people would have understood without a second thought. She was going out on her bicycle. That simple ride would become the beginning of a case that still unsettles Britain more than half a century later. Judith's body would be found days later near Comberford Lane, hidden beneath hedge clippings and plastic fertilizer bags. A young soldier would be convicted for her murder, then cleared after spending 25 years in custody. And after all of that, the most painful question remained exactly where it had started. If Andrew Evans did not kill Judith Roberts, then who did? Wigginton was a quiet village on the northern edge of Tamworth, surrounded by lanes, fields, hedgerows, and open land. In 1972, it was the kind of place where routines mattered and neighbors noticed one another. Children rode bikes. Families kept regular schedules. A teenager cycling after school did not immediately create fear. Judith Roberts lived with her family on Gilway Lane. She was described in later reports as bright, academic, and a grammar school pupil. Her father, Vincent Roberts, was a schoolmaster, and the family was known in the area. Some reports also mention that Judith had a twin sister, Anne, though for this story, the central facts remain the same. Judith was a child from a local family moving through familiar surroundings on a route she had taken before. On Wednesday, June 7, 1972, Judith came home from school in the late afternoon. Later accounts describe a small family disagreement that evening. Some reports say it involved makeup, while others describe tension around her evening meal. None of those accounts suggest anything that would explain what happened next. They describe the kind of ordinary household friction that would usually disappear from memory by the next morning. Judith eventually prepared to go out. She was still wearing her school clothes, including a blue and white dress and a navy anorak. Her bicycle was a green Raleigh, reportedly a gift from her parents. She left the home on Gilway Lane and rode toward the lanes around Wigginton and Comberford Lane, an area of fields, hedges, and country roads. The timing is usually placed around the early evening, roughly between 5:30 and 6 o'clock. A neighbor reportedly saw Judith leave. Another local witness later recalled seeing her near the junction of Wigginton Road and Browns Lane. These sightings mattered because they showed Judith was still close to home, still following a familiar pattern, and still apparently moving freely. Nothing about those last confirmed moments suggested immediate danger. There was no public struggle reported at that point, no confirmed sighting of someone forcing her away, and no clear sign that Judith knew she was about to cross paths with violence. She was simply a 14-year-old girl on a bicycle, in daylight, on a route that should have brought her home. As the evening continued, Judith did not return. Later accounts say she was usually expected back in time for familiar family routines, including watching the television soap opera Crossroads. When she failed to come home, concern grew slowly at first, then sharply. Her parents searched the house and garden, hoping for a simple explanation. By about 10:30 that night, the police were contacted. The first stage was a missing child search. Police, local volunteers, dogs, soldiers, and military personnel from nearby Wigginton barracks became involved. The countryside around Wigginton was searched through lanes, fields, hedges, and outbuildings. For 3 days there was still a possibility, however fragile, that Judith might be found alive. That hope ended on Saturday, June 10, 1972. Searchers moved through a field near Comberford Lane, close to the route Judith had taken. A soldier involved in the search found a bicycle in or near a hedge. It was a green Raleigh, and it was quickly understood to be Judith's. The bicycle was not the only discovery. Nearby, searchers saw hedge clippings, plastic bags, and sheet material. Beneath them, Judith's body was found. She had been concealed in a field close to the road, a short distance from the life she had known. The scene showed investigators that this was not an accident. Judith had been violently attacked. Later reports described fatal injuries to the head caused by blows from a heavy or blunt object. Her body had been covered with hedge clippings and plastic fertilizer bags, suggesting that the killer had taken steps to hide what had happened. That detail changed the emotional weight of the case. Someone had not only attacked Judith, someone had remained composed enough or desperate enough to conceal her body before leaving the scene. It raised questions investigators could not easily answer. Was the killer local and familiar with the area? Was Judith targeted, or had she simply met the wrong person on the wrong stretch of road? The investigation became one of the most intense murder inquiries the Midlands had seen in years. More than 200 detectives worked on the case. More than 15,000 sets of fingerprints were collected. More than 11,000 statements or house-to-house inquiries became part of the investigation, and thousands of leads were followed. Because Wigginton Barracks was not far away, soldiers based there were asked to account for their movements on the day Judith disappeared. Among them was Andrew Evans, a 17-year-old soldier from Longton, Staffordshire. At first, he was not a clear suspect. He was simply one young man among many who had to explain where he had been. Evans had serious personal and medical difficulties at the time. He had suffered an asthma attack and was awaiting discharge from the Army on medical grounds. Later legal summaries described him as socially awkward and semi-literate. After leaving the barracks, he became depressed and was prescribed Valium. When asked about June 7th, Evans said he had been at the barracks. He named fellow soldiers who he believed could support that account. Police later found difficulties with that alibi. 2 of the men had already left the barracks before the date of the murder, and another could not be traced. That did not prove Evans was guilty, but it gave police a reason to question him again. In October of 1972, officers visited Evans at his grandmother's house. After they left, he became deeply distressed. He told his grandmother he feared he might have committed the murder. The next day, he went to a police station and asked to see a photograph of Judith Roberts. What followed became the center of one of Britain's most serious wrongful conviction cases. Evans said he had been having dreams or visions of a girl's face. He did not begin with a clear, stable confession. His words were uncertain and confused. He reportedly said he did not know whether he had done it, and at other moments said he must have killed her. Detectives initially considered the possibility that he was a fantasist, but over repeated questioning, they became more convinced that he was responsible. Evans gave some information that police believed only the killer would know, while also giving many details that were inaccurate or inconsistent with the evidence. That contradiction would later become critical. Evans was questioned over several days. Later reviews found serious concerns about how those interviews were handled. He was not properly supported at key moments by a solicitor or doctor, despite his condition. He was often in distress, and his mental state would later become central to the appeal. On October 12, 1972, Andrew Evans was charged with the murder of Judith Roberts. By the time his case came to trial in 1973, he had retracted his confession. He no longer accepted that he had killed Judith. But the prosecution case still depended heavily on his own words. There was no scientific evidence linking Evans to Judith. There was no eyewitness placing him with her at the scene. No physical proof tied him to the attack. The case rested on a confession from a vulnerable young man who had gone to police because of distressing dreams and uncertainty about his own memory. Another troubling detail later drew attention. A barbiturate known as Briatol, described in reports as a so-called truth drug, was used during parts of the process. Years later, this kind of drug would be criticized because it could contribute to unreliable or false memories. At the time, both sides allowed its use, but it became one more reason to question the safety of the conviction. Evans was convicted of Judith Roberts' murder in 1973 and sentenced to life imprisonment. For many people at the time, the case may have appeared solved. A frightened community had an answer. A grieving family had been told that the killer was behind bars. But beneath that answer, the doubts never fully disappeared. Evans had given statements that did not consistently match the facts. His confession had come from a fragile psychological state, and without his own words, there was no solid case against him. For years, Evans remained in prison. Then, in the 1990s, his case began to draw renewed attention. He contacted the human rights organization Justice, and television journalists became interested in his story. Campaigners and lawyers began reviewing the conviction in detail. In December of 1997, the Court of Appeal examined the case. The judges heard that Evans had been in poor mental and physical condition during questioning. They heard that he had not received proper medical attention or legal support when he needed it. They also considered the lack of independent evidence against him. The court found the conviction unsafe. Andrew Evans was released after 25 years in custody. At that time, his case was described as one of the longest miscarriages of justice in the United Kingdom. In 2000, he received compensation from the Home Office, but his release created a devastating reality. If Evans had been wrongly convicted, then Judith Roberts' real killer had escaped justice. The case had not ended in 1973. It had only been buried under the illusion of an answer. In later years, researchers and writers explored other possibilities. One of the most widely discussed theories involved Peter Sutcliffe, later known as the Yorkshire Ripper. Sutcliffe was convicted of murdering 13 women and attempting to murder 7 others between 1975 and 1980, and some researchers believe his violence may have begun earlier. Supporters of that theory point to reported witness descriptions of a man near the area with dark curly hair and long sideburns, and to accounts of a vehicle similar to one associated with Sutcliffe. They also note similarities in attack method and concealment. Some authors and local researchers argue that these details deserve close attention, but that theory has never been proven in court. Peter Sutcliffe was never charged with Judith's murder. Staffordshire Police has not officially named him as the killer. Without new evidence, it remains a theory, not a confirmed answer. There were other strange details as well. Reports mention a letter made from newspaper cuttings that was sent to a Midlands newspaper after Judith's murder, warning of another schoolgirl death and signed Tamworth Murderer. Whether it came from the real killer, a hoaxer, or someone seeking attention has never been publicly resolved. That is what makes the Judith Roberts case so haunting. It is not only the violence of what happened to a 14-year-old girl on a summer evening, it is the collapse of certainty afterward. A confession that seemed to solve the case became the reason the case had to be reopened in the public mind. Judith's family lost a daughter and a sister. Andrew Evans lost 25 years of his life to a conviction the courts later rejected. And the village of Wigginton was left with a truth no community wants to carry. Someone killed a child near her home, and that person was never officially identified. Today, Comberford Lane is still a real place, not just a name in old court records and newspaper archives. Fields remain, hedges grow back, people pass through without knowing every detail of what happened there. But on June 7, 1972, that quiet road became the last chapter of Judith Roberts' life. The case leaves behind no neat ending, only a sequence of facts, mistakes, theories, and unanswered questions. Judith went out on her bicycle and never came home. Her body was found 3 days later. A young soldier was convicted, then cleared after decades in prison. And somewhere beyond all of that, the real story of who attacked her has never been fully brought into the light. More than 50 years have passed since Judith Roberts left Gilway Lane. The world around her case has changed, but the central mystery has not. Who was on that road with her? Who hid her body in that field? And after so many years, will the name of Judith Roberts' killer ever truly be known?